Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prophet podcast, hosted by Craig Phillips and Jeff Torrey. Visit us at fantasyfootballprophet.com. And now your hosts, Craig and Jeff.
Welcome everyone to the Fantasy Football Prophet podcast. I'm Craig Phillips, joined as always by Jeff Torrey. And today we're going to do a little mini episode, basically just an auction draft review. Basically off our auction draft we did the other night. We had our first big league auction draft. I guess this is kind of what, Jeff, you'd say our B league, really. You know, it's not the big league. It's the one before it. It's the same kind of setup. It's a 10-team auction keeper league, though. So, always fun to do. But I think we did this one a little early this year, so it's a little bit harder to do with injuries still coming up. But I think it went well. And, Jeff, I think you think it went probably really well.
I mean, yeah. My team ended up very, very good, so I'm happy about that. It was a fun draft too, with all the guys we get to talk to again from high school and wherever we have met them along the way.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we posted up the teams on Instagram, and everyone, I mean, there was more than one comment saying basically Jeff's team is probably the best they've ever seen. But it's had something to do with the fact that your keepers were David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, I know. I don't want people to get confused. I mean, yes, it's not. You can't usually get that team. This is if you will, this is a couple years in the making, and this is, in a keeper league, that's, you get rewarded for drafting well. So that's what I got.
Well, yeah, you have a pretty good start there. So we're not going to really talk about the teams necessarily. We're just going to talk about some things we noticed in the draft. Some situations. It's always good to talk about auction. We've had a few people ask about auction, and we haven't talked as much about it lately, which we should, because auction is, I mean, to me, auction is by far the best option. I like auction much more than I like a snake draft. I understand people wanting to do snake drafts. It's easy. Sometimes maybe with newer people to fantasy football, it's a lot easier. But, I mean, I think auction's the way to go. You don't have to, if you want players, you can get you can get any player you want if you want them badly enough.
Without a doubt, I love auction. I love what it brings to the table, and especially after you've played at least a few years and you really get into it, you try an auction compared to a snake, and you will feel like you're getting trapped into places where you have to pick certain people. And not only that,
exactly.
But I mean, I like this because you have to pay attention the entire time. As soon as someone's nominated and his price starts going up, you have to stay cool, calm, and collected, and decide if you're going to bid, if you're going to try to raise it. You have to. There's a whole lot more to actually consider when you're going into an auction, and I think it's way more fun too, because I think the stakes are a lot higher every single pick. And I mean, we were laughing. Me and Craig were texting before the draft last night, and Craig was like, I can't believe this, but I'm actually getting nervous, because we got so used to doing snake drafts for preparing for the season that we forgot like how intense it gets right before it launches.
Yep, and that's, you can't just like go into an auction to start the year like without having done an auction before. I mean, we did it with this one really, but that's why this one is kind of our warm-up league to our bigger league, which is in a couple weeks. So that's why we kind of did that. Like, if this, you need to do some mock auction drafts. It's not quite the same, but you have to get into that mindset and do a few of them, because I think everyone's going to be different. Like, some things, I mean, some crazy things. Like in this one, since it's just a keeper league, there was a little bit less running backs on the board, but the one main one was Zeke. So I went big for Zeke, because I pretty much knew coming out of this draft you needed a top running back. And if you didn't get a top running back, I think you're going to be hurting. So I spent $74 out of a $200 budget on Zeke. That's a hefty price. I've not actually seen somebody go that high in an auction.
I haven't either. And that's actually a good point, though. So after you did spend that much money on Zeke, what did it feel like? Because a lot of people will have that option where they have to go big on one or two players. Yours was one. Well, but I mean,
and luckily,
what was your experience after the fact?
Well, I say, well, luckily, I already had two great keepers in Melvin Gordon and Odell Beckham, so I could do it. Like, and that's a lot of things. It has to be your situation. If it's just a straight redraft auction, it's a little different. Maybe I feel like those prices will actually be a little lower, because it's still, there's Zeke, Johnson, and Bell out there. But I feel like if you're in a draft, you get one of those three. But with me, when I did that, it basically made it to the point where I had to start getting Zeke. Made it so I had to get values at other places. I couldn't go for any really of the big wide receivers on the board anymore. I couldn't go for any more big running backs. I had to try to take more risk, I guess, in a way, and then shore it up with safe guys at the end. Like my risks were Sammy Watkins, which a lot of people aren't, excited about him because of the injuries, but like somebody like that you can get because you can get him for a little bit lower price, but he has high upside. So that's what you end up having to do when you go really big is like maybe get some more high upside guys with a little more risk. So I got Watkins, I got Eddie Lacy, Martavis Bryant, kind of the riskier plays, I guess you would say. And then you shore it up with some little bit better options like I got Mike Wallace for $1, which I think's, he's not exciting, but for $1, take him. And Willie Snead, more of those safe guys, you know what I mean? So I think that's what you got to do if you don't have as much money. And when you went into it, like you had those good backs, so you were just targeting wide receivers too.
Yeah, and it's kind of the opposite of yours, right? Because you had to go big on one guy, where I literally was in the position where I was set, right, at running back. I had no problems. So what I was going to do is I was going to sit back. And first of all, I started by nominating like a kicker and defense because no one's going to outbid you for them, so I'm just going to get who I want.
I was just looking to – and you got Matt Bryant, Houston Texans D, which could be some of the best options there, and that's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
I nominated Vinatieri, and somebody bid me another $1. So.
It'll happen sometimes, but good for them. Like, let them take it for $2, whatever.
Yeah.
That's how I started off, and then basically I just waited for people that looked like they were going to go for a good price. So I was in the bidding a lot, but really I kept in the bidding for Des Bryant because he went for undervalue. So I got him right off the board, and then when Demaryius Thomas came up, I got him for $20, which I thought was a huge steal. So basically,
I think that's great value.
And then all of a sudden, your roster is looking pretty good. I have 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and then I knew the next big guy I wanted to go for. So I decided to target Aaron Rodgers. But the thing about that, and this is a very good lesson to learn, but some people are going to love a player more than you do. And I thought I was willing to go 10 over his asking price because I had the money, I had the players already that would have put me in a position where I could just dominate. But he went for so much money that even I
39.
Yeah, so he had 39, and he was only supposed to, I think 25. So basically I just said, hey, this bidding war has gotten out of control. I can get a quarterback for much less. So I let him go. But it just shows you there's certain players that if you can't just have one guy in your mind because someone will love him more a lot. And that was just the thing with Aaron Rodgers. So I ended up getting my boy Cousins. Sorry, Kirk Cousins for only $6, which is wonderful, right?
The quarterback thing is very interesting to me because we've talked a lot about waiting on quarterback and getting cheap quarterbacks, but obviously sometimes there's situations where you can try to get Rodgers. It made sense. You already had Bell and Johnson, and you had the room to do it.
Exactly.
If you don't, $39 is crazy because that's okay. Rodgers went for $39. The second highest I think was Tom Brady. Brady ended up going for, if I have it right, about $18. And then you had Matt Ryan actually next at $16. And then the next highest was, I believe, Drew Brees, which actually went lower than Matt Ryan, went for $13. Okay, and those were the big guys. Everyone else went for much, much cheaper. And so even Andrew Luck, because the injury concern, Andrew Luck went for $4.
Which is a great steal for whoever got him. As soon as he comes back.
Exactly.
But you're probably going to miss a few games of him not being Andrew Luck.
But here's where I think I love the still waiting on quarterback strategy. Cam Newton, who we're not as high on, but there's potential there yet. He went for $1. $1. I got Russell Wilson for $3. You got Jameis as your backup to Kirk Cousins for $2.
Yeah.
To me, and Ben Roethlisberger went for $2. I think, let's see here, Phillip Rivers, I know, went for very cheap as well. Phillip Rivers went for $1. To me, those are just some great values out there, and that's why I think you definitely, if you're in a situation where you can go after Rodgers, sure, go after Rodgers, but you don't need to. And you can get a great quarterback, and it takes these quarterbacks are costing you the same amount of money that Robert Turbin is costing. Like Cam Newton went for the same amount of money as Robert Turbin and Shane Vereen. That is, as much as you're down on Cam Newton, you're not down on him that much. Are you?
No, and that's, we talk about both positions, but quarterback and tight end, if you need to save money, those are the places to do it. And I really do. Yep. If you're not, especially in most drafts, in most auction drafts, if you're going to get one of the top 3 running backs like me and Craig had, you're probably going to be a little strapped for cash at the end.
Yep.
So that's the perfect place to spend $2-3 on a starting quarterback, and then once again, $2-3 on a tight end that is going to be very, very good. I mean, Jimmy Graham went for $5. I think there was 3 that went for some serious dollars, and that was Kelsey. Actually, Reed actually might have been a steal too, but Kelsey and Gronk for sure.
Yeah, Gronk went for 33, so he went. He's always going to go high, and that's why I'm never gonna have him on my team. Even Olsen went for 13. Reed was the steal at 5 because everyone's really concerned. But I think 5, even for a guy I'm concerned about, that's a great price. I really like that a lot.
That is for him, yes.
I kind of wish I wouldn't have let that one go. Graham went for 5, kind of a thing. I don't have Kelsey's number right in front of me right now, but I know Kelsey had a little bit of a bidding war going on for him, and he was getting up there in price. But that's the thing. That's where this is kind of how Kelsey went for 15. Which, oh man, the team that got Kelsey also got Greg Olsen. $15 and $13 on tight ends. $28 on tight ends for 2 of them.
So, yeah, that's a mistake.
You got to have a little better strategy than that, people. Come on.
Yeah, this is. Right? I do have to say this for the league. It actually makes it almost difficult at times because it's like the Wild West of fantasy football. Right? Our people are crazy in here. They'll try anything.
Well, that's what I think. If you're you're just a regular. It's a redraft auction. There's no key involved. You get. At the very least, you get a top 5 running back. If you don't want to go insane, go for Bell, Johnson, Zeke, I understand. But get McCoy or Gordon. You have, in an auction, you have that ability to end up with one of those guys. I think every single time you need to leave the draft with one of those guys. There's no way around it to me. And then if you spend big and get those, get a top running back, get a top receiver, and these kind of things, you can round out a team with a very cheap quarterback and a very cheap tight end, but they're still very good. And these wide receivers, you can fill at the end of your wide receivers, fine. Like Willie Snead cost me $12. That's not much. That's perfectly fine value, for a player like that. And like you got Macklin for $6. Macklin's a good back end wide receiver for $6. Those kind of players. It's just, I think that's the way to go because you need those top running backs. And I don't think for some reason people they get into an auction and they think, oh, the prices are going crazy. But you know what? You better go into it with a spreadsheet almost with your tiers on it. Have your rankings and know, okay, I need to get a player before this tier ends, kind of a thing. And the problem is if you wait until it's the last player on tier, what happens is Lamar Miller happens in our draft.
This was my favorite because I give Lamar Miller so much shit. And not because he's not, he's not the worst player in the world, but I just always think he's overdrafted. And then this happened, and I was just blowing Craig up, and I was like,
he went for $52. It's insane. And the reason he went for $52 is because he was at the end of a tier. It was kind of people all kind of realized, oh, wait a second, I don't think there's anybody else left after this. At least in that same category, maybe that you would think Lamar Miller was, which I don't know if he is there, but $52, man, that is. It's crazy. I think that you can't wait until the tier is almost over. You know what I mean? And that ends up happening once you get a little bit into the draft. It doesn't happen right away. People aren't panicking, but it's still early. But it's when those top guys are going away, people will panic and those prices go up because McCoy went for $58. Lamar Miller is only $6 cheaper than McCoy. That's crazy. Because McCoy was a second running back off the board, so you're able to get him maybe for a little bit of better value. It's just. I think you need to end up in an auction. You have all the power in the world. You need to come out with the top running back, and I think we did pretty well. If you take our 2 teams, Jeff, we have 4 of the top 5 running backs. So you have 1 and 2, and I have 3 and probably 5 with Gordon. So
yeah, and even if I wasn't, even I wasn't keeping 2 of the best running backs in the game, I definitely would have went after one of them. I mean, luckily, I probably wouldn't have had to go quite as hard as Craig had to. He was just in the bad position of going for the last guy in that tier. But I definitely would have got 1, and I actually liked how it worked out as far as the rest of my running backs. Oh, yeah. I held on to cash, and this is a wonderful part, and it does show you that you can get value later on. And it also shows you that it definitely depends when you actually put someone up for auction. So you can nominate players, and it's very easy to see. The first one, they always go for a little bit, and then there's kind of a lull, and then it goes back up. And usually you get through all of the main guys, probably top 10 in both positions, wide receiver, running back, and people are kind of their money is depleted by a large extent. So now people are starting to get very, very kind of making sure that their money is being spent exactly where they want to. So I started nominating these kind of middle tier running backs, and I got them for C.J. Anderson. Is he the greatest thing ever? No, but he has a wonderful position on the Broncos. He's going to be their main ball carrier, and I got him for $14. I got Amir Abdullah for $13, and then Doug Martin for $15. So I got 3 guys that are very, very playable. So if I paired those 3 with a Le'Veon Bell and say I couldn't have David Johnson, that would still be a very, very good running back crew.
Yeah, that's somehow you ended up with the depth at running back and also the top guys, which just doesn't seem to work happen very often.
It was a little bit of luck as well involved. When people spend money and when they can't.
But I think the biggest takeaway is you come out from the draft with one of those top guys. You need top running back, and if you a top receiver too. I think that's the way to go. We each, I guess maybe we came out with each 2 top 10 running backs, and each had one top 10 wide receiver. And I think if you want to win, that's what you got to do. I really do. And also another thing, if you are in a keeper league, I think you do have to pay attention to some of the other teams. Like, if you have a team that is absolutely stacked in keepers, like I had to pay attention to what your team had. You had Bell and Johnson coming in. I couldn't just come into a draft and just be like, I'll just kind of build a decent team that can probably win. No, you have to realize you're competing with teams that are just going to be great teams. You have to make sure you have that potential to have a great team. That's why Zeke, I had to go all out for Zeke. I think people sometimes don't pay attention to that. They're solely concentrated on their team, which is a way that you want to build your team, but you might have to change your strategy up depending on what other teams are going to look like if it's a keeper league kind of a thing. I couldn't just go into it. You have to have the talent to match that. Bell and Johnson are so good, you have to get something to match it. Try to match it.
Exactly. And to Craig's point, one of the very smart things he did, not only going for Zeke, but, at some point, you only have so much money that you can play with. So basically, he saw my team, and he was like, okay, I'm already behind the 8 ball. So obviously I went for depth, so I have a lot more leeway. Injuries, things like that aren't going to derail me near as quick. But in order to catch up to me faster, he built a very, very strong starting lineup, and he has less of a bench. But that just means he has to pay attention a little more on waivers and throughout the year and make sure you just add and keep kind of toying with your lineup. So he'll be able to stick with. He's probably better than the majority of the league, and he probably can stick with me definitely on a week basis. It'll just be whether or not he pays attention throughout the year so he can make sure his team is ready for the playoffs. So what he did was very, very smart. So that's another thing that you have to kind of pay attention to. If you're behind the 8 ball, spend all that money on guys that are really going to start for you, and don't worry as much about trying to catch the next lightning in the bottle. Where I can spend, an extra $10 on someone I don't necessarily have to use because I had the money for for this year.
Yeah, and don't end your draft with any money. That's pretty much that's another thing. I think we all did well in that. I have had years in the past where I ended up with way too much auction money at the end, and that is probably the worst feeling there can be. If you end up with like $15 extra and your draft is over, there is not many worse feelings than that.
No, because that's you add that onto. Another player, and all of a sudden you have a wide receiver 3 turning into a wide receiver 2. So that was the one thing I wish I've loved my team, but I had $5 for my last pick, where I really, when it comes down to it, I should have $2 for my last 2 picks and not care about that.
Yeah, and I think that is what I've found myself. It's happened to me before, and the more I do auctions, it doesn't happen as much. But I don't think you can wait around very much. People wait too often. They wait too long. And they think, all these guys are going for too high, I'll get value. No, I think you just have to strike at some point. You have to get talent. You can't just let everybody go off the board. What happened is, I even had this happen to me in this draft even, is to be like, okay, I'll pass this one up because I have a couple guys I like. And it gets to the guys I really like yet, and I wasn't the only one who really liked them. And that price got a little bit out of control. Right. So I think you just can't sit and wait too long. I think that's kind of what I've learned over doing auctions is you wait longer and longer. Sometimes it'll work out and you'll get really good values, but I think the majority of the time you get good values, but you got a lot of middle tier guys. You know what I mean? You don't have these top end. You need top end guys.
Yeah, and let's be honest, you can't think that like an Aaron Rodgers, you can't think that you can wait everyone out and like let them buy their QB and he's going to be forgotten about. Or that goes for any of the top 5 QBs for sure.
Yes.
For that one, I would almost rather like, hey, I like Cousins. Like I knew that he would probably be my second one I went for if, Breeze and Brady and Rodgers got out of control. So basically for me, I threw Rodgers out there being like, all right, let's see what he goes for. And I mean, thankfully I did, because now I know I can't get him. So it's down to plan B. And I'm not stuck with, hey, if him and every single other one I liked went off the board, and all of a sudden I'm in a bidding war and I have to spend $10 over what I thought, or I have to jump to, someone that I'm not wild about, like Cam Newton. It puts me in a bad position. So definitely, throw those guys out. That is your plan A. And if I can get them for a reasonable amount, take them. If not, time to pull back and reconsider.
All right, I think that's going to be it for a little auction draft review. We only plan on going about like 8 to 10 minutes, and that's about 20, 21 minutes. There's so much to talk about with auction and auction draft strategy. We could talk about that all day.
We could go for days. We love auction.
This won't be we'll do another one of these where we really get into more strategy again, because there's just so many potential things that could happen. I mean, we'll have another auction draft in 2 weeks, and we'll probably talk about what happened in that one, and I bet you it'll be different than what happened in this one. It's just still adapting to every situation.
Well, yeah, and that one's live, and that'll be in Pittsburgh this year, actually, and that is what we call our main event. If
that's
you will.
The big one, and we'll see what happens. We got to end up with a top running back. You already, that's got some things to think about there, Zeke. Hopefully, it's
I was gonna say, will you? This is actually a good question to end this segment. You went huge on Zeke. You spent $74. Are you going to do that for another one, or would you spend $70 say on one of the top 3 guys, if it costs that much?
I don't 100% know. I'm still thinking this over. I'm thinking what would happen in, like, let's say that league. I still think you need to come out with a top running back. And to me, that's a top 5 guy. And I know in that league, it's just going to be Zeke and it's going to be McCoy again. Those are going to be the 2. And I think I got to come out of there with one of them. I think that's the way it has to. You have to do it. Especially, again, this is another one. We look at the situation. We look at the teams we're competing at. And that's another team that has it. There's another team there that has Bell and Johnson again. And Julio. It's just an absolutely stacked team. I think you got to learn. You got to compete.
It's strange to say, but if Elliott, if his suspension actually comes down and say he has 3 games or something, it will drive his price down, and it actually might be more beneficial. You can grab that guy, get other players, and you just have to worry about it for 3 games. Yep,
it's gonna be something to think about, and I just think you need a top guy. You need top guys, and don't wait around for mediocre players. They could break out or whatever. Get the guys you know are there and going to be top guys. I don't know. That's how I see it. But I think that'll be it for today. We'll be back with 2 more episodes this week. I think tomorrow we'll have wide receivers 16 through 30. We'll go over those. There's a lot of, probably my favorite players actually are in the 16 to 30 range this year for some reason at wide receiver. So we'll probably have a lot to talk about. We will talk to you guys next time.